Rob Garland, and welcome to the second episode in my YouTube series about motivation and practice for the guitar. These are a little different in that I'm not playing the guitar like I usually do in lessons. These are some topics that I don't often get to talk about that I wanted to share with you, so I hope you'll find them helpful. So let's talk about GA.S, Gear Acquisition Syndrome. The internet has had a profound effect on all aspects of the music business, one of which being that there's an endless stream of equipment videos out there, right? Gear reviews, gear demos, gear forums, on it goes. Now, years ago, the only way you would be able to find out what a new piece of equipment sounded like was to get in your car and go to the music shop and take your guitar, plug in, and actually demo it in person, which seems very old-fashioned. But perhaps that process made us a little less susceptible to GA.S. I'd like to question the phrase, though, guitar practice. You know, my title was, Is GA.S Affecting Your Guitar Practice? The word practice almost has a negative connotation, doesn't it? I mean, practice sounds like work rather than play, which sounds like fun. So maybe we should just play the guitar rather than practice it. You know, when we're young, we play the guitar. As we get older, we tend to practice the guitar. Just a thought. All right, so let's actually talk about gear acquisition syndrome. The big question, is tone, or good tone, whatever that is, in the fingers or is it in the gear? Now, let's assume we can all agree on what good tone is. That's subjective at best because we all hear differently, right? We all have our own set of references. But just for the sake of argument, let's say we agree that Eddie Van Halen's Brown sound or Eric Clapton's Woman tone are examples of good tone. Okay, so after we recognize that, we start to think that great tone can only be achieved by using certain gear. You know, if I could find a Marshall Plexi, an old one, take out some of the power tubes, put it through a Variac, maybe I'd sound like Eddie. No, I wouldn't. See, here's the issue with that way of thinking. There are YouTube clips of players like Eric Johnson and Steve Vai playing other people's equipment, and they sound exactly like themselves. So this, I think, is pretty definite proof that tone is in the fingers and the hearts of the players. Now, that said, before people start yelling at me, okay, these players do not use cheap gear, do they? You know, so having nice equipment that's well made and has a big dynamic range obviously is helpful, right? And I would say it takes the tone you already have in your fingers and amplifies it, pun intended. But players like that, or your other favorite players, remember they've put in a massive amount of time on the instrument, learning how to play, defining their tone from within. It's highly unlikely when they were doing that, they had amazing gear. You know, they probably learned on basic equipment, like many of us do. I'll give you an example for me personally. The first guitar I ever owned was by a company called G.A.S in the UK. And it was not a subtle instrument. It was bright red, kind of a Strat-ish looking thing, and it had the word Axe in huge letters written on it. It played about as badly as any instrument I've ever played since. The action was so high, there was snow forming on the top of it. But I loved it. I loved that guitar. And by the time I upgraded a couple of years later, the next guitar would have been a Charvette by Charvel, if you remember those. So when I got to that guitar, it was such an upgrade because the action was lower, and you know, when you first start playing, you don't know about things like action. You know, it made a huge difference, and it was amazing to me. But I'm glad I went through those early years on the axe, you know, because it fighting against it became a challenge, you know, and sometimes it's good to overcome a challenge. So my advice. Another thing you do, let me say this as well, another thing you do is think about signature models. Now, There's plenty of those on the market, right? And they're usually very expensive. And maybe you love a certain player and they have a signature model, but rather than thinking you need that model to play in that style, or maybe take into a life of crime so you can buy a Dumble amplifier, why not take your own guitar and make adjustments to it? You know, over the years of playing, there were certain things that I noticed I could change about my Fender Strats, for example. Like I always used to float the bridge so it would go up a minor third when I pulled up on the bar, and that helped it stay in tune because they have some real limitations, those bridges, right? I got rid of the string tree, still don't really understand what that thing was ever doing there. I would change the nut sometimes, I would make small adjustments to the saddles, you know, all kinds of things, right? And even just playing the guitar, and really delving into what the volume and the tone controls do on the guitar, as well as different pickups. It all made a big difference, you know. So those things were useful for me in the sound I was looking for. So maybe for you, there are certain things you could do to your guitar, you know, to kind of work towards the sound you're hearing. I did make the mistake though at one point of buying a Steve Lukather signature model. Music Man, Ernie Ball Music Man guitar, and that was a big mistake because obviously Luke sounds amazing on that guitar, but he's a small guy and I'm pretty tall, and I felt like I was a giant with a toy guitar, and it just didn't work for me at all, you know. So I learned my lesson right there. These days I'm less interested in gear, to be honest. I've heard this from students at MI, TrueFire, private students, you know. I hear about this cycle that a lot of, and you know, I've done this too in the past, but I hear about this cycle that students go through where they watch a gear video online or see a video somewhere about something, and they become utterly obsessed with this particular piece of gear, and they feel like it's the holy grail. You know, this is the piece of gear they've been looking for this whole time, right? And so then they start thinking about how they can get this gear as quickly as possible. Now, I guess some people do sell gear. I usually actually sell my gear to invest in new gear if I do make a change, but that's less common, I think. You know, it's more of a financing thing I see going on. So they set up the financing, they get their holy grail gear, you know, they count down the minutes till it arrives, and they get it, and they're thrilled for a day, maybe, or two, or a week, right? Now, not all cases, I'm just saying, I've heard of this happening pretty frequently, right? So, and then the magic wears off a little bit, and they say, well, it's a good pedal or amp, it's okay. You know, it doesn't do quite what I thought it was going to do. You know, when I was watching the 5-camera HD shoot online with the stereo sound mixed perfectly, it doesn't sound quite as good as that, but, you know, it's okay. And then what'll happen sometime soon after is the cycle will begin again. And a new piece of gear becomes, you know, what they must covet, and the whole thing goes on and on. So here's my advice. Break the cycle, okay? Focus on what you have. Focus on getting a good sound out of what you have. You can pick up different guitars, plug them into different amplifiers, but ask yourself, what are you actually playing when you pick up the guitar and plug it in, you know? Now, I'm not saying a new pedal, for example, or a new guitar can't inspire new ideas. A great example would be the Edge, right? If you took away the Edge's, you know, refrigerator effects unit with his delays and his choruses and everything, you know, those U2 songs would not sound the same, right? But that's him. That's a unique voice on the instrument, the way he used the effects, okay? You could do that, but I'm just saying if you're really trying to get something out of what you have, then you got to look more inward towards the instrument and yourself and what you're playing. You know? There's nothing wrong with being super interested in gear and actually going through that cycle if you get a lot of pleasure out of it, right? As long as you're not having buyer's remorse all the time, you know. For some players, and I have some students like this, discussing gear with their friends or on forums or on YouTube and hunting down a new piece of gear is as much fun to them as actually playing the guitar. And that's totally cool. And if that's you, then brilliant. Keep doing it and embrace the gas, right? No problem. But you know, if you're a hobbyist that revels in that, good for you. It's totally fine. This video is really aimed at the people out there that maybe are frustrated with their playing and feel that they're not progressing in the way that they would want to on the instrument. and if they take a look at how they spend their time, if you're spending a lot of time on gear forums, a lot of time reading about equipment, but you're frustrated about your playing, then I think it's time to reevaluate the use of your time and try to balance your gas with more actual time on the instrument. Finding inspiration within the limitations of the same 12 notes in the West, right? The same chords, the same everything, right? This fretboard, this is what we have, right? Finding inspiration in that can be life affirming, okay? The hardest part of practicing, or really I should say, the hardest part of playing the guitar is opening the guitar case or reaching for the guitar off the stand, okay? Keep that in mind. Remember, the instrument will always give back to you what you put in. Now, I know this is an obvious thing to say, but I want to say it anyway, because sometimes we just need a little jolt to think about that, Think about the joy you felt when you were playing the guitar when you first started. If that joy has sort of dissipated a little bit and it's feeling a little bit more like hard work, try to reconnect with the instrument, try to feel enthusiastic about it. And like I say, if you still suffer from gas and you enjoy it, then great. But if you suffer from gas and you feel it's a detriment to your playing, then try to find a little bit more of a balance, and I think you'll get more out of the whole experience. Okay? Thank you for watching. Please be sure to join in me next week for episode 3. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'd love to hear comments, suggestions about other topics. Take care. Go play your guitar.